What I would really like to see, though, is a record, statistics, whatever you call it, indicating the extent to which the U.S. military spends money on petroleum products, particularly fuel. And this, if you stop to think about it, this concerns NASA too. Satellites, spaceships, um, and with the military, submarines, airplanes that are in the sky all the time or almost all the time, battleships, drones, tanks, jeeps, military carriers, everything. The entire amount of consumption of oil products. But getting back to this other subject, which is really ancillary to this, when this thing happened with the civil rights legislation and the heart, soul, and flesh of the Democratic Party essentially split off from the direction that the rest of the party was going into, because essentially the decision that the Democrats made was, we have to stick with our traditions. We have to stick with our slave mongering white supremacist traditions. And we can't let a liberal Mick become president, Ted Kennedy. So they went with this guy that nobody knew from Georgia, somebody that could be easily controlled. Uh, I mean, look at this. The state, one of the last states to fly the Confederate flag. This is who the Democratic Party chose to be president of the United States. And people were saying things like, I don't see any difference between him and Gerald Ford. And there really wasn't any noticeable difference, not in their campaigns anyway. The only difference was really that Jimmy Carter was the president that brought back religion into government. He was the born again Christian. He brought religion back into government, and he brought bad mouthing liberals into the government. People think that Ronald Reagan started all of this bad mouthing liberals, but it was actually Jimmy Carter. If you go back and look at some of his campaign clips, I guess you'd call them, interviews and things like that with the press, almost everyone that he gave had some. He was in there bad mouthing liberals to some extent. This would be a big mistake for our country to go in this direction. Things like that. So when Nixon allied with the George Wallace Democrats, the heart, soul, and flesh of the party, Thomas Jefferson's party of slave mongers and so on, the Republican Party didn't like it either. But the Republican Party, there was virtually nothing left of it. Richard Nixon was the king of the Republican Party. He was all that they had left. Eisenhower's vice president had racial covenants on his house in Pasadena. I have a book here I was going to read from the introduction of, maybe on another video blog I will, about Richard Nixon and selling his house in California to come out to Washington and be vice president. He had protective covenants on his property. No Negroes and no Jews going to buy my house. You know, and of course this was controversial, but nonetheless it was accepted, and awful lot of people loved, worshipped, and adored Richard Nixon. He was the next best thing to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, whoever, whoever your favorite guy was. So there was definitely, without any doubt at all, and people don't talk about it much at all, They didn't then, and they don't now. The Democratic Party made a conscious choice. We are going to go the Southern Confederate route. We're going to be whistling Dixie. We're going to get Charlie Daniels to come out and do an anthem for us. We're going to make Leonard Skinner the latest rock and roll group, Sweet Home Alabama, the Marshall Tucker Band, and all of this business. The Grand Ole Opry is going to do it again. But like I said, the Republicans didn't like this either. But what could they do? It was like if they were going to win another election, this was the only choice that they had. The Democrats felt like they were let down by northeastern race traders, and so they went with the Republican Party. And this is the reason I'm bringing this up is you still see this effect, particularly in the House of Representatives. You'll have this block, no matter who gets elected president, no matter what happens in the United States of America, there's always 40, 60, or 85 white male Southern Democrats that always consistently, unless it's to spend like a really big sum of money for white people, that always vote Republican, always. That is really, the Republicans are kind of in a hard position to criticize it too because they're completely and totally dependent upon these people. And the Democrats rely on them to, for committee chairmanships and things. And now with the Republican Party in complete and utter absolute control of redistricting, with all the rest of it controlled by the remnants of the Confederacy, way past 100 years since the Civil War was over. This is something that we're all going to suffer beneath for at least another 10 years, at least probably 15 years. Because no matter what you do or what you say or how much you worship and adore and build altars and get on your hands and knees for the Democratic Party, you're still going to have these same guys that aren't going to let you do anything, that are going to always vote Republican. So it's kind of a wasted effort of time and energy to get into this Democratic Republican single party monolith party of Jefferson bosh and expect that anything is going to come of it for you. It's not going to happen. These guys are business as usual. They got their programs. They got their things that they do. They're not going to change anything. So the displeasure that you see people criticizing Obama, criticizing the Democrats, and so on, is a function of that. It's because they still believe, they still have this religious belief that somehow the Democratic Party are the party of the people. And the Democratic Party, the tradition of that party, like the tradition of the Republican Party, the tradition of the Democrats is slavery. It's almost as if this Southern coalition, the Southern faction, got together with Northeastern and Northern Democrats and said, we could make this work. We could make it so that these people have their own home. They own their own home. They own their home. They own car. They can even send their children to university and still work for free. Ooh, this could be quite lucrative. So it's really this when you're jobs. It's the preservation of slavery, the remnants of slavery. Everybody's a slave now. We're all slaves. And the large component part of this that holds it all together is this idea of oil in the military. So, you could spend the rest of your life trying to change this. And maybe, like I said, 20 years from now, I'll probably be dead in 20 years. I hope I'm not, but I probably will be. But you know, if you're 30 years old, you're going to be my age, and maybe something's going to change. It's like, what's going to change? What these other things that I'm talking about, you could get these things. You could have these things. Now it might seem impossible to you that Congress, a president, whoever you look at, is going to allow the government to provide subsistence to every man, woman, and child. But stop and think about this for a minute. The Austrian economists, or whatever you want to call these guys, you know, the free market's going to do it all. Just get big government off our backs and just, you know, let the whole thing just rip. Uh, you're not going to get rid of these guys. They're always going to be there. They're not going to do it legally, they're going to do it illegally. But they're always going to be there. That is something that is so deeply ingrained into the American psyche that I don't think you could ever get rid of it. So you have to learn how to live with it. You have to accept it to some degree, but you also have to temper it. You also have to regulate it. You have to make deals with these people. Instead of compromising with these people, you have to make deals with them. Like, if we're going to let you do this, what are you going to let us do? What do we get out of this? And a key component of that is, or as I see it, is solar energy. It's how you transition oil into something that is augmented by solar energy, because it's going to affect a lot of electrical plants that use petroleum products, that use oil, diesel fuel, or whatever it is to create electricity. I'll have to continue this because I'm getting lost.